Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for joining us here today with the MMAC podcast. I'm here with a very special person here today. It's my brother, my good friend, Shaheer. And we're here to talk about sort of the virtues of Ramadan and how we can just navigate this month better and get the most out of it, inshallah. So stay tuned, stay throughout the whole thing, and I'll let brother Shaheer introduce himself, inshallah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My name is Shaheer Syed. I was a student at Mason. So my journey in Islamic studies first began in when I was 6 years old. From 6 to 10, I memorized the Quran. After that, just went through public school as normal. And after this, I decided that I wanted to understand the divine words that I had memorized. And because of this, I decided to go to Texas, to Euless, Texas, to the Bayina Institute to study for 1 year at Bayina Institute to learn Quranic Arabic. After this year is the year that I came to Mason for 2 semesters. Although I wasn't bad at computer science, it wasn't what I would consider my passion. It didn't fit right with me. And then I knew from then on that my passion and my goal in life was to study Islam. And then now, that's where I am now. I'm in my 2nd year in the Qalam seminary, and it's a 5-year program. But right now I'm in Virginia because we're all, mashallah, social distancing and we're responsible people. Please tell me that all of you are responsible as well and staying home and being careful, inshallah. And yeah, that is me.
Alhamdulillah, man. We're so lucky to have you here. You know, although I miss you at Mason so often, I'm just so glad I have a buddy who's pursuing this, especially when this community needs it so much. Alhamdulillah. So let's get on with it, bro. Let's start talking about Ramadan. And I want to start off by asking you, in your experience and just what you think in general, what do you think is different about this Ramadan?
Yeah, so, wow, that's a good question. What do I think is different about this Ramadan? So, one thing that I've been thinking is that right now, a lot of people are struggling. Right now, I know people, and I'm sure there are people here, and you yourself, Abar, probably know people who are struggling a lot, can't make ends meet. They lost their job. They can't pay rent during this pandemic. And organizations like Helping Hand and others that do a lot of humanitarian work are struggling to help these people, and especially during these times, they need even more help and funds from donors to do the required work. But so I don't want to be insensitive to that issue. But for those of us that, alhamdulillah, are blessed to have the ability to quarantine ourselves and sustain ourselves and financially manage, this is a time where it's actually a blessing in disguise for us. This Ramadan, I personally feel, and the way I'm looking at it, is that it's teaching us how to treat every Ramadan. Every Ramadan, man. For real, like, if you think about it, half of the Ramadans that we have, no, never mind, scratch that. Every Ramadan we have, about 7 or 8 of the nights, at least, we spend to have with an iftar party. We spend going somewhere. And that's fine, right? It's part of the spiritual experience. If I have to ask somebody what someone's missing the most about Ramadan, it's like, oh, the iftar parties, the tarawih hangouts, the guys hangouts, staying up till 4 a.m. And people mention this, right? And it's a reality. But we have to remind ourselves that, yeah, that has benefits, but the purpose of Ramadan is very spiritual. It's very personal and isolated. And the way I think about it is that the Prophet ﷺ, he did i'tikaf in the cave of Hira for a month. But back then, i'tikaf wasn't like a legal ruling. It wasn't like a formulated process. It was just him staying in the cave for a month. And only after this entire month did the divine words, "A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq," came down. He's a prophet. He became a prophet after 1 month of that, and the divine words, "Read in the name of your Lord," was revealed. And one of the lessons that teaches us is that in order to better ourselves and to become better people and to develop spiritually, we need to be isolated and we need to have that reflection. So this is kind of what I think about this Ramadan. I think this Ramadan is a truly blessed Ramadan. And for many of us, we may be feeling that this is helping us. But inshallah, we'll get into that topic later.
Spot on, brother. Thanks for mentioning that section from the Seerah. I mean, it's almost as if Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would like the whole act of confining himself to a cave, what prepared him for revelation. And if we relate that to our lives, we have so many things we do that are not necessarily necessary, and we spend a lot of our Ramadan doing that. I mean, you and I were talking about this just the other day, how we just start planning for Ramadan halfway into Ramadan, and before we know it, the first, say, 14 fasts are not spent the most productively. And I'm speaking first and foremost about myself. So, emptying our lives of all those aspects, those social aspects that can often obscure the real reality, the immersion that we need to keep ourselves in during Ramadan. I feel like this is a blessing that we don't have that option at all, and that we're just with ourselves, trying to make the most of it. And I feel like it's actually really showing us where we're at spiritually,
Absolutely, man. SubhanAllah. Absolutely. And one thing that you just mentioned that's really profound actually is that there's an ayah regarding that. The full ayah isn't coming to my mind, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَاحْتَمَلَ السَّيْلُ زَبَدَ الرَّابِيَ وَمَا يُقُدُونَ عَلَيْهِ فِي النَّارِ ابْتِغَاءَ حِلْيَةٍ أَوْ مَتَاعٍ زَبْدٌ مِثْلُهُ. Essentially, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings a parable in the Quran where He says that He subtly indicates that our hearts are like valleys. Our hearts are like two mountains and the valley in between. And when there's a valley in between, water collects here and toxins and different impure materials collect here, right? And if you're ever in a valley, you'll know that in that area, there's maybe a river and there's a bunch of rocks and there's a bunch of stuff. There's just stuff everywhere. It's not, I wouldn't say it's unclean. It's just very haphazardous. There's stuff everywhere. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about how Allah sends rain down. And in our minds, we're supposed to allude this to the Quran. Revelation comes down, rain comes down, and it washes away all the impurities in the valley. Washes away everything. Like our heart, washes away everything. And then what the next part is key, the water, the only thing that stays back is what is beneficial. The water pushes away everything and all the froth and dust and dirt goes away. But now that the water's come, fertile land is there and things can grow, fruits and vegetation grow from there. So this is what we learned. Like what you said is really, really profound. This kind of ties into that this Ramadan is a means for us to empty our hearts of the dunya and to fulfill and to fill our hearts with hopes of the akhirah.
SubhanAllah, bro. Thanks so much for sharing that beautiful reflection from the Quran itself. I mean, being on that topic, what do you think are some of the benefits to not having this kind of Ramadan? What do you think was really beneficial about last Ramadan that we're not getting this Ramadan from the community, from the 5 pizzas served at the iftar party, whatever it may be,
So what are the benefits of this Ramadan as opposed to others, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like actually, what are the benefits of the last Ramadan opposed to this? So, for example, we had the community, right? Last Ramadan, we were going to iftar parties, socializing with everybody. What do you think are some of the benefits of that we're missing out on this Ramadan?
That's a really good question. So, a lot of times we're talking about the fada'il and the benefits and virtues of this Ramadan because we're always trying to be optimistic, but it's also good to take things into perspective and to look at the pros and cons of each side. So one of the pros of having the community aspect to Ramadan in general is the khutbah, man. The khutbah every Friday, the first one's hype, the second one is hype-ish, and the third one's like, get your energy up, get off everyone's tired, and the fourth one is oh no, it's gone, Ramadan's over, right? But I just summarized 4 khutbahs, okay? That's like 1.5 hour material at least. But what happens is that there is a communal love that develops. People who had grudges against one another spell it out and they forgive one another. They give gifts to each other. They feed one another. The Prophet ﷺ said when he entered Medina for the first time, and understand that when he first entered Medina, when he was migrating to Medina, he's entering, although technically a peaceful land, there are hearts that are hostile towards him. The Jews don't want him there. Some of the polytheists don't want him there. That's why in the constitution of Medina, the Prophet ﷺ had to clearly spell out, no one is allowed, like the polytheists residing in Medina are not allowed to sympathize with the polytheists of Quraysh and attack us, and the Jews may not do this, and like, because he had to hold it together. And because he knew he was coming to a hostile environment, he had to calm the community down and talk about community. And his first address to them was, Ya ayyuhan nas afshu salam. O people, spread peace. Wa at'imu ta'am. And how do you do that? You feed people. He said straight up, wa at'imu ta'am. We all know, when someone gives you that chai, that doodh batti, when someone gives you that food, doesn't matter how much you hate them, you can't help but love the person who gives you food. So I think that's one thing that we're missing, that community food aspect. Now, I'm not again, we have to keep in mind that should be limited. If we're spending every night eating biryani and samosa and we're like burping in tarawih, or because we eat, we can't even pray tarawih at all, we have to question our priorities in Ramadan. But I think that would be my take on how the other Ramadans are more beneficial in some senses, and I would say the community aspect and the mutual reminding.
You just took me back on flashbacks of uncles belching away on a tarawih next to you. And
oh my God, bro. It's, dude, the funniest thing is, right, like when they get so tired, they don't know, like that happens to all of us, right? Like it gets so funny. Like Ali Tarawih, right? So there are some places in the Quran where the word ضالين comes.
Yeah.
Or like Surah Fatiha, غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Now, at the end of Surah Fatiha, usually reciters read this like really slow and like, and they make it like really, I don't know what the word for it is. They make it echo. They make it powerful. One of my friends, long time ago, he used to make the other places in the Quran that were the same, ضالين, he used to purposely make it sound exactly like that, ضالين, to see how many people behind him would say Ameen, even though it's not that. He was evil, man. Astaghfirullah.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
But realistically, you're supposed to recite it the same way anyways.
Yeah.
But it's so funny, like when I'm reading a surah, and I know that someone, at least one person behind me is going to say ضالين, Ameen. So it's just funny because everyone's like food coma, man.
We've all been there, man. I probably joined in with those folks who said Ameen a couple of times.
It happens, man.
Yeah, man, it happens all the time.
It's
just one of the perks, and just one of the funny things about Ramadan, when it comes to
the memes of Ramadan go wild, man. Go wild.
On that topic, of like health and just eating too much, that brings me like to an interesting question, which I'm asking is, right now in quarantine, all our schedules are so, all over the place, and rightly so, right? But do you think our schedules, the way we're living our lives right now, can sort of interfere with our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our connection with this Ramadan, our connection with Salah? Because, the things we structure our life around have a big impact on us, our mental health and everything,
Yeah, that's a good question. So starting off, like we all have our different schedules. For example, for myself, I attend Qalam online now that I'm over here in Virginia. For some of us, we're attending classes online, and for some of us, we're not. For some of us, we're done. For some of us, we're just we're working too. Some of us work part-time. Some of us work full-time, right? So we each have to take into consideration what schedule we have. And it can interfere with our connection with Allah to a degree. This is an advice that you're going to hear a lot, that any action can be a worship if you make the intention to make that worship. For example, studies. Oh, I'm studying to make halal income so I can provide for a family. There we go. Halal intention, you get reward for that. It's easy to talk about that conceptually, but it's difficult to implement that. It's hard to look at a screen of code and be like, I'm doing this for God. Like, it's hard to have that
I'm
intention.
there so often, man. Yeah.
Oh man, it's the funniest thing, man. SubhanAllah. Like you're bagging, produce in the grocery store. Allah,
It's like, oh, wow.
like, that's a good thing to do, but to be real with ourselves, it is difficult.
It is. Yeah.
So one of my teachers at Qalam, he shared an advice that he received from one of his teachers, and he said this is probably one of the most profound things he heard. One of the skills of the ideal believer, the ideal mu'min, is to develop the awareness of the small pockets of time where they have time to worship. Those 10 minutes between one class or another, that half an hour, usually spend that time just doing nothing. You have no idea how valuable that time is. No idea. Like that time, for some people, that half an hour, they can read a whole juz of Quran, man. For some people, they can reflect on a whole surah of Quran. And there you go, you fulfilled one of the most important forms of ibadah in the month of Ramadan. So we should ask ourselves, what empty pockets of time do I have between things? Most of us look at free time, but we don't consider the free time between different important times. So I think that's something we should consider if our schedules are complicated, because it can be very, very complicated. So if you can't dedicate to Taraweeh and other things, then just focus on these small pockets of time, inshallah.
Bro, it's so amazing that you mentioned that, because just the other day I was reading about this concept of we're always so focused on time management, right? And it's about just doing the exact thing you planned at the exact same time, but we lose something which is even bigger, which is energy management, which is more about like managing your focus, because like you said, those 10 minutes of salah, of reading Quran with focus, by completely immersing yourself in it, feeling like there's nothing else to be done at that moment but read the Quran, do that act of ibadah, is a skill in its own that we need to try to develop, so that we can take advantage of those little pockets of time and not always feel like we're just going from task to task, moment to moment, not really, accomplishing anything.
Absolutely. This is something that, like you said, this is a very hot topic. People love to talk about time management, self-care, self-help books, and all that stuff. But what can oftentimes be lacking is the amal, the action. A lot of times we, especially in our generation, in postmodern society, we like to hear advice a lot. People pay good money to hear a motivational lecture. Yeah. But then like a day after, hey, what do you talk about? No one knows anymore, right? So it's all about the action. And so in this month, spending those few valuable minutes is a hujjah, is a proof for you on the Day of Judgment. We have so many narrations where the Prophet ﷺ said the Quran will come as your intercessor on the Day of Judgment and say, this person stayed up in the night because he loved to read me. Like, may Allah make us among those people, man.
Ameen, bro. Leading on to that, bro, while we're on the topic of ibadah and all the different kinds of ibadah we can do during this month, what is the balance that we have to strike? Because I feel like a lot of people, including myself, get wrapped up in, okay, we have Yasir Qadhi doing a whole month of Quran, we have Umar Sulaiman doing an Angels series, and we got to hear khutbahs, you got to pray 20 rakahs tarawih, 20 rakahs every time, mind you, I'm joking. but yeah, we got to try to pray our sunnah muakkadas, and then you have the aspect of it. I want to finish Quran this month. I want to learn more about Quran this month, maybe get into tafsir, some of the more advanced studies. And how can you strike that balance? What is more important? And yeah, I just want your take on that.
That's a very good question. And this is something actually a lot of Qalam students, including myself, asked our teachers right before Ramadan came in this year, especially because the Islamic knowledge, learning Islamic knowledge is considered to be a form of worship. So we ask the teachers, okay, should our priority be worship or should it be, uh, our studies? And they answered something, and I'll add to it. They answered in a really honest way, and they said, unless you're Imam Bukhari or Imam al-Ghazali, you usually don't have to choose between worship and studies. You usually have time to do both. Usually it's, am I going to be lazy or do worship, right? Because usually most of it, I don't know a single person who doesn't have time to do like Quran reading because they're too busy praying. Okay, I don't know a single person like that. Unless, mashallah, you're a wali of Allah, you're that type of person. But this is what they said, that usually this is a cop-out because we just want to, Allah, we just want to feel like we are busy. But I'm going to add to that and say that maybe outside of Ramadan that may be the case, where that we always waste time. But in Ramadan, typically, sometimes we do have to choose. Because in Ramadan, we are all suddenly like different people, and we are operating at a different plane than we are in the other 11 months of the year. So during this month, what we should focus on, number one, primarily the Quran. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. The month of Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed. فيه هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. In it is guidance for people, and it contains signs regarding objective morality that distinguishes falsehood from truth, and more guidance. And Allah says in the Quran, فِيهِ شِفَاءٌ لِمَا فِي الصُّدُورِ. This is a healing for what is in the heart, what resides in the chests. So this month is definitely the month of the Quran. That's what we should focus on. So if you have a choice between prayer and Quran, like of course Tarawih is a sunnah. So aside from that, if you have the choice between praying a random nafil prayer, or if you have the choice between doing dhikr or doing salawat, the Quran should take priority. Not to say that the other stuff are not important, but this should be the priority. And on that note, I highly recommend, if you don't have a good Quran translation, Abrar knows this too, this is what I recommend to him, and I actually want to hear more from you, Abrar, on that, the clear Quran. I think this is, I think it might be flipped on your screen, but this is the clear Quran. And the clear Quran is written by Mustafa Khattab. It's a beautiful translation. It's got like section headers, you can't really see. It's got section headers, it's got footnotes explaining verses that seem odd out of context. It's got, in the English flows, there's no like thou and lest ye. It's very clear. But Abrar, I want to hear your thoughts on it because you have a perspective of primarily relying on the English language as of now. May Allah increase your knowledge.
First of all, bro, bringing up those Qurans that when you read it sounds like Hamlet. It's better not to read that. But Shaheer, my brother Shaheer, actually gifted me that Quran, the clear Quran. It's a beautiful Quran. It's so simple to read. There's also a lot of footnotes and references, and I think sometimes just tafsirs or maybe not tafsirs, which are really beneficial. And thanks for leading me onto the topic of the Quran, bro, because I wanted to talk to you more about that. You mentioned the Quran should take priority in a lot of situations. And my question to you is why? And before you answer, I feel like one of the reasons it's important for me and just many other people is because uh, when you're trying to get to know the deen, a lot of the times we give priority to speakers, khatibs, over the word of God itself, because we feel like we're not equipped necessarily to hold the word of God, to understand it. Borderline, maybe afraid because we don't know what's in it and how it's going to make us feel, how we're going to interpret some verses, and how we might fall into the trap of interpreting the wrong way because we have so much misinformation about the Quran. So I feel like for me, developing that relationship with the Quran was essential because it gave me comfort in my heart that my religion is truly, it is all good, you know, all of it is good and all of it is from God. And I can't pick and choose. I gotta accept all of it, and reading every verse in some way is going to be relevant to my life, you know. So
Mhm.
I just want to hear your thoughts on that, because I feel like you just speaking to you, I feel like you have such a great relationship with the Quran, you know. MashaAllah.
May Allah increase both of us in our relationship with the Quran, inshallah. I definitely need to work on that as well. But one thing I would say is that the Quran, we get intimidated often by approaching the Quran for many reasons. One, we feel unworthy. We feel like we've sinned too much. We feel like Allah doesn't want us, an impure being, to get so close to the pure and divine text. And this is a false notion that shaitan usually places in our heart. Then the question is, why is shaitan still affecting us in Ramadan? Well, it's because shaitan has trained our nafs for 11 months, and our nafs, ourself, has now been classically conditioned, I guess you could say, to berate ourselves. But what we know is that the Quran, the scholars call it bahrul la sahil lah. It's an ocean that has no beach. It's an ocean that has no shore. And that means that it has breadth and it has depth. It has everything. So there are some people, which is the most of us, who are going to be able to swim at the top and maybe just at the edge, just at the top, right? And there are going to be some people who can dive 100 feet deep. And there are going to be people who can go all the way down to the ocean floor and extract gems. This is the Quran. So what this means is that the Quran was meant for everybody. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Allah says over and over in the Quran, He encourages us and implores us to use our intellect. You don't need to be a scholar to use your intellect. You know, just, you don't have to wear a kufi, or you don't have to wear a thobe to do that. Anybody can have a relationship with the Quran. Of course, we all need to be careful within our limits. Okay, you know, even for myself, there are verses that I don't fully understand, and I have to know the tafsir of it beforehand. And if you don't understand a verse, go ahead and ask somebody, and don't feel shy about that. But understand that everyone is supposed to have a relationship with the Quran. Everybody. You know, some people can go deeper, but that doesn't mean that you can't.
SubhanAllah, bro. You know, that's the best answer I could have hoped for, because you pinpointed the exact obstacles that come into play when somebody tries to read the Quran. And you know, there is no barrier between us and Allah, although many people like to you know, phrase it that way and give us that impression. There isn't, you know, it's accessible for everybody. And there are people like you who pursue student of knowledge, who go in depth into the Quran, and we need that, because we need to be able to rely on people to give us not just information but wisdom when we need it. And we need to know what our bounds are. But that's not to say that any average Joe, let's say any average Maryam, could just pick up the Quran and just feel ecstatic reading it and feel like it understands them in a way that nothing else does. Because a lot of people, when they experience doubt in the deen or anything, it's like, open the Quran, because the Quran talks about people who experience doubt.
Yeah.
And He talks to them like Allah talks to them. And that's probably what we need to hear at that exact moment when we experience doubt. So yeah, bro, like, thank you so much for bringing all that beautiful knowledge to us. Next, I want to talk about a very popular Ramadan myth, and we've talked about this before. And you know what it is. It's called the Ramadan Muslim. So just
حول كمان صديق. I'm joking. All right. No, that's a good question. It's a good question.
Yes.
I'd like to begin. I apologize because just yesterday I was reading the hadith about this concept of Ramadan Muslim. Now you're like, huh? That exists? Okay, but it does. And the exact words are slipping my mind, but if I may, I would like to summarize the hadith. We have to ask ourselves what Ramadan Muslim means. So Ramadan Muslim, as we define it, is a Muslim who practices their religion more seriously and engages in spiritual practices more in Ramadan than other months. Correct, Abar?
Yeah.
Yes. So in that case, there's a hadith where one of the Sahaba said about the Prophet ﷺ, they said the Prophet ﷺ was always serious in all months about his religious practice. He was a kind man and everything, but when it came to religion, a different narration says, let me just take a tangent real quick. His family used to say that he was so involved with us, he used to play with us, he used to work in the house, but the moment he heard the adhan, his face changed as if he couldn't recognize us anymore. Like a man on a mission, man. SubhanAllah. But that's a side point. This companion said he was serious in all months about his worship. But when it came to Ramadan, he was more serious. When it came to Ramadan, he was more generous. He worshipped more. He read Quran more. Angel Gabriel would come down and review Quran with the Prophet ﷺ. That all sounds awfully like a Ramadan Muslim to me, man. That sounds... So if we're calling people Ramadan Muslims in a derogatory manner, be careful. Because you're being derogatory unintentionally to the Prophet ﷺ. We as Muslims believe that being a Ramadan Muslim is the whole point of Ramadan. It's the whole point. May Allah open our eyes.
Dude, sometimes I often compare it to a boot camp. It's like we're supposed to pray every day five waqts a day. There's no exception for that. You do that in Ramadan, out Ramadan. We have this 1 month where we're supposed to fast the whole month, 30 days, engage in more ibadah. And it's like a boot camp. It's to prepare you for living life outside Ramadan and to take good habits away from you when you leave it. That's the whole point, is to increase. So the person who is already practicing, I don't like those titles, but increases their practice, and the person who's maybe emerging into the faith, just recently discovered its beauty, is also increasing it. So that, like you said, that's the whole point of Ramadan. So anybody who's judging other Muslims, saying that in this month, you're all Sheikh Molana, and outside it, you're this or that. That's, frankly, that person needs to check him or herself. Yeah.
Absolutely. The surah. Oh my gosh, how am I forgetting the name of the surah? I apologize. I can't remember the name of the surah. Astaghfirullah, man. But basically, one of the surahs in the Quran, we learn about su'ul dhan, husnul dhan and su'ul dhan. And that one of the diseases of the heart is that we always look for defects in people. Ta'an, what we call it. Ta'an. Like, ta'an means to stab. Like, when the word for ta'an is like the word you use when you impale someone with a spear. So ta'an also means impaling someone's character, and prodding them and looking for defects and always seeing the bad side of things. That's a disease of the heart. And may Allah protect us from that this Ramadan. May Allah keep us optimistic and focused on ourselves.
Ameen, bro. Ameen. And going on from that, bro, I want to ask you, we've been talking about salah, increasing in worship, increasing ibadah, all these things. What do we say to the person who, this is probably their worst Ramadan, right? People are asking us, hey, is this your best Ramadan? But what if this is somebody's worst Ramadan? Worst case scenario, maybe they haven't fasted all the fasts that we've had so far. Maybe they've engaged in sin that they do, maybe they've engaged in more sin during this Ramadan than they do outside Ramadan. And the whole nature of the sin cycle is you despair, you lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you do it more. So what do we say to them? Because the whole virtue of Ramadan is in forgiveness, right? Speaking from personal experience, Ramadan was what propelled me into my deen, and I feel like I'm the person I am today because I had one great Ramadan. and it has the capacity to change you in ways you couldn't have ever imagined. So what do we say to those people, bro?
Question, man. Answer generically, not just particular to this Ramadan, but for anyone who feels like they're having a negative Ramadan. Know that it's caused for some reason. And particularly for this time, the reason may be that we're at home all the time. When we're at home all the time, like if I'm going to be real with our young Muslim brothers and sisters, man, it's so easy to let your guard go on your eyes, what you consume, what your heart is exposed to when you're alone. We have everything right here on this phone, everything available. And may Allah forgive us, and may Allah allow us to stay away from and to follow as much as possible. But isolated like we are now, it's very difficult to fall into sin, and it's easy to despair. And in other Ramadans, it feels difficult as well. It's easy to feel intimidated by the practice of other people. It's very easy to feel that way. Now, what we know is that Allah said in the Quran, Zukhruf, I believe, or Zubar. قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. He said, "Oh, my believing who transgressed against Allah to their own detriment, don't lose hope in Allah's mercy." And what we learn from this is that Bani this tafsir, and they said it is a sin. It is a sin to lose mercy. Imagine how merciful Allah is, that bad assumption of Allah in of itself so offensive to Allah that it's considered. Imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is thinking, think that I will forgive you? Like, what do you think I am? I'm going to forgive you? That's like the misunderstanding Allah from His core. And because of that, scholars say that even saying that is sin. And that's not meant to be that's not meant to discourage you. That's meant to be an encouragement. Like, wow, like He's so merciful that considering Him otherwise is not a good thing. So just focus on, don't worry about someone else's Ramadan experience. You may be hearing all these great stories how people are staying indoors 10 juz a day and on their prayer mat, and they're don't worry about all the spiritual stuff. Your Ramadan experience is your Ramadan experience. Don't let anyone steal that from you. Allah chose you to be alive at this moment. There are people that I know personally who didn't make it to this point. They passed away right before Ramadan or in Ramadan, but they didn't get to see through. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen you and I to be here. So that's what I would say to the brothers and sisters who are struggling to understand that Allah is waiting for you with open arms, as is appropriate for Him.
Subhanallah, bro. That cut me deep. I mean, I was really impacted by that because there's so much truth to all of that. And in a broader conversation, man, how can we sort of change the perception of young Muslims who just feel intimidated and judged and targeted by this deen because of the way it is often portrayed to them,
Yeah. So one thing I've always firmly believed, may Allah forgive the people who have done this, and may Allah, and we hope that these people had the best of intentions, but they weren't the best at communicating. I've always believed that the Muslim ummah and community has pushed Muslims away further than Islamophobes have. People on certain news media channels who say racist things don't push Muslims away from their faith as much as some religious authority in Islam can push someone away. Just the fact that, for example, I'm not a religious authority whatsoever. I'm a student. I'm a second-year student. I'm at the bottom of the totem pole. But the fact that I'm wearing this and I'm wearing this, if I say something, if I were to say something, just to be real here, not out of arrogance, if I were to say something and people would take it authoritatively, and people would take what I say as a representation of the Islamic paradigm and perspective. And that's so dangerous. And leaders need to be aware of that. And sometimes when a leader does not know how to properly communicate, or when they have diseases in their own hearts, which anybody can have disease in their hearts, even scholars, especially scholars actually, because shaitan, you know what they say, right? There are more devils following scholars than there are following everyone else. When that happens, then they can easily say something and be harsh towards people, which pushes people away. And what we know is that the Prophet ﷺ, he was so soft. You know, there was a companion of the Prophet ﷺ who he was young. He was a young man, and as you know, as a young man, he's got a bit of a kick to him, right? He has his own personality.
Yeah.
And the Prophet ﷺ and this companion are close together. They're traveling together, and a beautiful woman walks by. Beautiful. And this companion, you know, we think we obviously, the companions, radiallahu anhum, they're the best of people, but they were human.
Yeah.
He was staring at this lady open mouthed. He was staring, and the Prophet ﷺ saw him. He took his chin, and he just moved his head away. he just took the head and just moved it away. He didn't he's not like, ya haram, ya ashab, ya ahl nar. Like no, he's not like saying that he's going to hell. He's not like screaming at him. All he's saying is, you know what?
Bro, I swear that is straight out of a Bollywood movie. That scene though.
Oh man. And then like the tongue, because they didn't get to see her and she didn't get to see him, and they were supposed to reunite. Anyways, not gonna go down that road. Of course, we're all good Muslims here. We don't watch those movies, right? I'm messing with y'all. But you know, subhanallah, he was with people, very soft, and unfortunately, many people are pushed away because the leadership and people in the community, people who should not be representing Islam. Like if someone were to walk up to an average Abdullah and ask a question, who is that person? Hey, am I sinful for doing this? Yes, you're. Like, no, you're not. Like, you know, there needs to be a balance. Unfortunately, this is very, very present in Western Muslim Ummah. It's something that is born out of religious dogmatism. Either one, and of course, you know, I'm not a psychologist, but what I think is either someone is new to the religion or new to practicing their religion at least, and they have that zeal and they want to share it with everybody and they don't know how to communicate it properly, or perhaps they just have a disease of the heart. But Allah knows best. But may Allah protect us from that. And if you do feel like you're pushed away from the religion, know that those people do not represent Islam whatsoever. The Prophet ﷺ taught us kindness. The Prophet ﷺ taught us that if we see someone sin, we make excuses in our head. Maybe they're not actually sinning. Maybe they're doing something else. You know, so don't let other people ruin your Ramadan experience.
SubhanAllah, bro. You know, like everything you said there, it's so true that you need to warm your heart towards someone or something before you can listen to them, right? And I feel like that comes to your broader point that the Prophet understood this completely, and he spoke to people where they were at. And we have this sort of impression that everybody during the Prophet's time was so flawless, right? They had flaws, and we're supposed to have flaws, and Allah doesn't refer to people as not being sinners, but he refers to the people of Jannah as the best of sinners, right? Those who come back to him. And so yeah, just this notion of speaking from a height down to other people just because they know, and my teacher has made me and his students aware of this, that if knowledge makes you arrogant and it is a tool for you to target, accuse other people, then that knowledge is bad for you. And the Prophet never spoke to anyone in an accusatory tone. He said things in general terms, and the people who were involved understood what he was talking about, but he never pointed fingers.
Mm.
And you know, thanks for bringing all of that up and just summing all of this up so beautifully, bro. I think we're at the end of our time right now, but I feel like people who are watching, who will be watching, will enjoy every bit of this conversation almost as much as I did. Uh, I mean, we're so lucky to have you, bro, come on this show for NMAC.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad
yeah,
glad to be here, and I definitely enjoyed. Oh man, for real.
thank you, brother Shahir. Any benefit that you had from this conversation is from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Any faults, any ill impact is from us. Uh, Again, I want you to pray for brother Shahir. Pray for all the Muslims who are suffering during this time, and inshallah, may Allah make this the best Ramadan we've ever had. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Shahir, want to say salam?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah benefit us with knowledge.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Take care.